Next, I'm going to be introducing Jodi Liggett, who is the Vice President of External Affairs for Planned Parenthood Arizona, where she oversees reproductive health and rights policy objectives, and is also the Executive Director of Planned Parenthood Advocates of Arizona that educates voters and candidates for public office. She most recently served as Senior Policy Advisor for the City of Phoenix Mayor Greg Stanton and was instrumental in achieving housing every chronically homeless veteran, as well as the passage of Phoenix's Equal Pay Ordinance. We think that's pretty phenomenal. So this question is really directed to you in your Planned Parenthood capacity. So our question is, how did Planned Parenthood, an organization that we have worked with for years, play a role in the 2018 elections, and how did you deal with the question of abortion, a sometimes sensitive subject, particularly for Arizona's voters?
Great. Hello, everybody. Good morning. Thank you for coming to listen to what I think is a really thoughtful conversation about what just happened in this election and what we're going to do over the next 2 years to turn this whole thing around. And I have a lot of confidence in our ability to do that because women are just on fire. I cannot believe. One of the things I've gotten to do in my checkered career is I ran the Arizona Foundation for Women, and we put out a Status of Women report every couple of years that looks at a lot of measures: safety, health, economic empowerment, but also political participation. So I've sifted through that data a lot, and I have a pretty good handle on Arizonans and women in Arizona politics in particular, and Arizona voters. So Planned Parenthood and abortion, right? These are big electoral issues every year. Republicans put abortion in their platform a number of decades ago, and ever since then, right, that it has just been a wedge issue. And I think it's important for all of us to recognize that. So these culture wars, to a certain degree, are artificial. We're being used by partisans on the other side who want to make women's health into a political issue because their base of social conservatives is, I will just say, obsessed with abortion as an issue. Voters are not. Voters are not obsessed with abortion. We poll a lot, and you can get numbers all over the place asking people about abortion as an issue. Depends how you ask the question, but I think it's important for all of us to realize, first of all, number one in 5 women was a Planned Parenthood patient at one point in her life in this country, and 1 in 4 women in this country, whether it was at Planned Parenthood or another provider, had an abortion in her lifetime. That's a lot, right? This is a common experience, and the single most effective preventative for abortions is what? Laws? No. Contraception, people. Not you people, right? Like, this is what we've got to help people understand. Planned Parenthood, in our 100-year history, and we are proud to provide contraception services and cancer prevention services and abortion services. We do not shame our patients for the services they seek. They are safe, legal, and effective. Most of what we do is not abortion, right? Most of what we do is prevent abortion. So Planned Parenthood has prevented more abortions than any state legislature, any politician, any church, any preacher, any picketer ever has or ever will. We've prevented millions of abortions, and we're not going to shame folks who need that service. And the American people and Arizona voters are in the same place. They may personally be opposed to abortion. They may have all sorts of spiritual, moral, and religious beliefs about abortion for themselves. the vast majority, it's typically over 80% of Americans and Arizonans think that abortion should be legal most of the time, whether they want to have one or not. Everyday people understand the distinction between making decisions about our own lives and trying to manage everybody else's morality, right? So this is what we have dealt with at Planned Parenthood for 100 years, right? People ask us often, why are you so political? Like, if we would just be nicer, people would quit persecuting us and our patients. Like, seriously? And what I say is, look, we've been doing this 100 years. 100 years ago, Margaret Sanger and her sisters and friends opened up a clinic in Manhattan, and 3 days later, they were thrown into jail. So for 3 days, we were a non-political healthcare organization. And then we realized this shit is real, and we are gonna have to take some power if we're going to survive as an institution, but more importantly, as a gender on this earth. Women have to take power to survive because we are dying out here. Arizona has one of the highest maternal mortality rates in the country, and for women of color, it is astounding. We have third world level rates of maternal mortality. If that isn't an argument for contraception, I don't know what is. In Arizona, our Medicaid system pays for over 50% of all births. I can't believe that all of those births were planned pregnancies. It would have been really good for most of those women to have access to contraception if they wanted it, and access to abortion services if they want it. And women who are on medical assistance should not be stigmatized and prevented from accessing abortion as a service. We need to get rid of that restriction. If you're a poor woman, you should be able to access your health benefits to pay for an abortion if you need one. And people agree with that. People agree with that. So in Arizona, I don't want to take up too much of your time, but in Arizona, our last few cycles have been so interesting. We actually have a very long history. It's been a great place, actually, relatively speaking, in America to run for office if you're a woman. We have the highest number we've ever had. Arizona's always been relatively high. I'm old enough to remember when my old boss, Governor Hull, a Republican, was elected in Arizona, along with 4 other women. All of the statewide offices in Arizona were held by women. Those women were really different from one another. We had a liberal Democrat attorney general. My boss, Governor Hull, was a moderate Republican who worked with Democrats across the aisle. I hate to say it, that was another era. That era is really over in Arizona and part of the country for the time being. But we're looking to shift the numbers and shift power so that parties do have to work with one another. I think it's important to realize as we gain power here in Arizona and out there more specifically, number one, the American people agree with us about what's important, that people should be able to support their families if they're working at a job full time. They should be able to support a family on a living wage. That women and everybody should be safe from sexual violence, racial equality, right? The American people are there for the most part. Those are not the folks we see outside our clinics or on Fox News, but those folks are in the minority. But back to women. So as women take power and we start to take over these institutions, progressive women have to understand that all women are not created equal, exactly. Some of our chief antagonists at the Arizona legislature are women. They're really mean, horrible, conservative women who want to impose their life view on everybody else in our state. So, right, that X chromosome, there's nothing magic about that. Like, it's just because we have 2 of them, like not all of us are evolved. So I think it's important to recognize that and to call out people who do not support women, even when they themselves are women. it's okay. Sisterhood doesn't require us, to ignore people who've got their boot on our neck, right? Nancy Bartow, one of my personal favorites at our legislature. So I think the future is just completely bright. I think I'm definitely the oldest one on the panel here. I've worked for a Republican governor in Arizona. I've run a nonprofit foundation. I worked for a Democratic mayor. I didn't change. I was the same person trying to help women and vulnerable people in all those situations. What I've seen now is just this giant awakening. Indivisible was part of that. The Women's March was part of it. People have just awakened to the fact that government impacts their daily lives in a very real way. I think we're all newly in touch with that. And that they're owners. We're putting people into the driver's seat of their own government, and women are leading the way in that. And that is true in Arizona. So don't buy into, this red state conception that people are putting out there, that these red states are just calcified and everybody there is a wacko conservative. Not true. Those may be loud voices, but out in the burbs and in the cities, everyday people who are just working to support their families and want something better for their kids are with us. And if we knock enough doors, we will take it back. We made great progress. We got a U.S. Senator elected, y'all. A woman U.S. Senator from Arizona. So that's the wave we're looking at.
Thank you so much. So I next would like to introduce Sharon Kirsch. And Sharon is one of 6 angry moms, although she doesn't look that angry this morning.
No, not this morning.
Who co-founded Save Our Schools Arizona a year and a half ago, and one of the thousands of volunteers across the state who fight every day to protect public education. When not volunteering with Save Our Schools, Sharon is an associate professor of English and rhetorical studies at Arizona State University. She's the mother of 2 feisty teenagers and believes that the people of Arizona, not out-of-state billionaires, should make decisions about the shape of public education in their state. And we agree.
Good morning, everybody.
I have a question.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Although I gave Sharon her question, so she's probably already ready. So the Save Our Schools was a phenomenal success, particularly starting with little support and requiring grassroots action from its inception. So we're asking Sharon to describe how women made this happen and how she motivated women and organizations throughout the state to get on board. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm very happy to be here and really, really honored to be on this panel with such distinguished women. Save Our Schools Arizona is only about a year and a half old, and we really were 6 angry moms who started showing up at the Arizona State Capitol. We learned how to use the request to speak system that Tricia talked about, and we kept running into each other at an education committee hearing, watching a bill work its way through our legislature, and kind of our jaws dropped as we realized what was happening. So those of you who aren't familiar with Arizona, our public education system is among the worst in the country. We have the lowest paid teachers, even with the raise they fought so hard for last spring. We have among the lowest per pupil funding. We have the highest student to counselor ratio. It's nearly 4 times higher than the national average. Our schools are in enormous crisis. We have a horrible teacher shortage crisis. 20% of all of our new teachers in Arizona quit in the first year. 42% quit by the 3rd year. We have 65,000 kids in our state who show up to a classroom every day where there's no permanent teacher. It's just a rotating list of subs because we can't find teachers to teach in our state and to stay in our classrooms. The crisis is so far beyond anything I could have imagined a year and a half ago, and I knew a year and a half ago it was bad. So we watched this bill work its way through the legislative process and thought it was dead, and it popped right back up at the end of the session and was passed. And it's a bill that would take public taxpayer dollars and put it on a debit card and hand it to a family who has to opt out of their public school, and they can use that money for private school funding and for other educational therapies for their kids. Now, we already have that program in Arizona. It's a voucher program. We call it Empowerment Scholarship Accounts in Arizona. We already have that program. It wasn't being used to capacity. It's only now for really certain small categories of kids, like kids with really special learning needs, whose learning needs can't be met by their local neighborhood school. And so in that instance, okay, they get some money to go find a better way to take care of those kids' learning needs. What this bill would do is expand that program to all kids in our state, a universal voucher expansion program. And we couldn't believe that our legislature would expand a program by 500% when we have 2,000 classrooms without a teacher. What in the world is going on? So we just said, this is it, we have to do something. We didn't even know what we could do, but then we found out you can refer bad bills to the ballot so that all the people in Arizona can say, do we want to expand this crazy program that takes public taxpayer dollars and moves it out of our public schools, or do we want to say no, enough? And so that's what we did. We referred Prop 305 to the ballot, and in November, by a 2-to-1 margin, the people in the state of Arizona said no more privatizing our public schools. So our organization is run by all women and then thousands and thousands of volunteers. We are truly grassroots. We are all volunteer. In the summer of 2017, when we gathered signatures to get this bill on the ballot, we did the whole campaign for $86,000. The people who push this legislative agenda in our state are out-of-state billionaires. The lawsuits that they brought against us cost far more than the entire campaign cost us. And they did all sorts of things, like they accused me, personally, and I'm truly just an angry mom, of criminal fraud. And I had to get a lawyer to defend me. They ended up dropping the charges, but only after 3 lawsuits and all kinds of complaints with our Secretary of State. So what happens in the state of Arizona is very likely happening in your state. So what Save Our Schools Arizona has come to realize is that Arizona has been, for 20 years, a petri dish, a ground zero for these privatization efforts that will want to turn our public schools into profit-making mechanisms for mostly white men. They've been extremely successful at this. In the state, they use Arizona as a place to test this legislation that is driven by these out-of-state billionaires, mostly the Koch brothers. For those of you who don't know, I'm sorry to tell you, it's horrible. So they draft the legislation, they run it through, often they run it through Arizona because our legislature on both the House and the Senate side is run by Republicans. And so for 20 years, they literally have gotten everything they have wanted at every step of the way to privatize our public schools, from charters to tax credit. They come up with all these crazy schemes that have taken billions of dollars out, have cut our public schools down by the knees. I guarantee you it's happening in your state in a much bigger way than you realize. So I'm happy to stay after to give you resources so you know. And we can all really start paying attention and hold our legislators' feet to the fire to make them prioritize our public schools, which in the state of Arizona, 95% of Arizona families choose. Many of us rely on our neighborhood public schools because that is our only choice, and that choice has to be made to be a good choice for all of our kids. So we believe at Save Our Schools Arizona, of course, that public education is a cornerstone of American democracy, and that is under fire across our country, and we have to fight to keep that a priority in our state and in the states across Arizona. So I'm happy to answer questions after. I'll just say one final thing. I think too often women get smacked down for being angry. We have good reason to be angry, and if we can use our anger toward productive ends, more power to us. So thank you very much for having me today.
Well, we love success stories. So our last speaker is Alejandra Gomez, and she's the co-executive director of Living United at Change for Arizona, organizing around immigration, workers' rights, living wages, and voter registration, just to name a few. Alejandra began her career in community organizing in 2007 during Sheriff Joe, and I think almost everybody probably knows him, Arpaio's racially charged criminal suppression sweeps that targeted immigrant communities. She was the field manager for the Adios Arpaio campaign that registered over 30,000 Latinos to vote. She served as deputy organizing director at United We Dream during the immigration reform push in 2013 and 2014. And for her question, we are asking her to let us know how Living United for Change, under her direction, mobilized the community, particularly the Latino community, on issues around immigration and minimum wage, and what role women played in these campaigns.
Great, thank you. Man, I feel like I'm with family here. This is amazing to be among so many women and such an amazing panel. I wanted to actually get a little bit of a pulse and see what states are represented here. How about this table? California is in the house, awesome. This table? Maryland, love Maryland. Awesome, how about this table? And just popcorn out, what states you're from? Indiana. Washington. Texas. Ooh, big things happen. What? PA, awesome. Virginia. Michigan, oh, Kentucky. Oklahoma. New York. Oh, big things happening there too. Okay. Georgia, yes, thank you. So, yeah. Oregon, Montana, Ohio. Across the country, we're taking our country back, right? And women are leading the charge. And that's no different here in the state. All of these women here, at one point or another, decided to get involved and take our state back. And I think that even though we have a big election that's coming in 2020, we can't forget that what happened in 2016 with Donald Trump actually was a long time coming, and that the fight continues beyond 2020, so we have to keep activating women. And we have to keep waging the fights in our states, because the new Congress that happened is super inspiring to me. So many women of color that are in there leading, and I'm really proud of that. And I want to make sure that we continue to build that, not only at Congress, but in our states. But I want to give a little bit of the history of Arizona. So for us, 2010 was a pivotal moment where grassroots organizations actually jumped in, because there was not much infrastructure and there wasn't a lot of people that were fighting back against the anti-immigrant sentiment that had happened, because Arpaio, he had already been doing chain gangs. He started doing roundups in supermarkets to target the Latino community and start detaining and deporting families. And so the Latino community at that point was a time that we got activated. And so we went from a crisis moment, from living in fear, to actually showing up at the Capitol, organizing and staying there. We stayed there for 103 days, and we said, we're not leaving until something changes. And that activism that started in 2010, that organizing, led to civic engagement. And in 2016, we were able to register through a coalition 154,000 people to vote, largely communities of color. And I'm proud to say that this year, we registered almost 200,000 people to vote. And that's a collective effort from the grassroots level. And that's the way that we're actually starting to transform the community. So the successes that we saw at the legislature here and the 4 statewide wins were actually the organizing and the thread of work that has been happening for the past 8 years. So it wasn't an overnight success, but it was a success in 2018, where we saw the largest amount of young people. Young people were actually voting at historic rates. Communities of color voted at historic rates, and we actually got pretty close to voting at the levels that we did during a presidential election, which was really amazing for Arizona voters. And so for us at LUCHA, we started with the immigration fight, but our members were telling us that we are not just concerned about immigration. We can't put food on the table, and we need to be able to do something about this. So we actually started as an organization that brought the Fight for 15 to our state. And any Fight for 15 organizers or participated? Awesome. Awesome, yeah. Give yourselves a round of applause, because that's a powerful fight. And so for us, we said that we are going to lift up the voices of low-wage workers, but let's actually try bringing a ballot initiative here to our state. And so we brought one to increase the minimum wage to 12 by 2020 and to provide earned sick days for our workers. And so in 2016, when we had Trump win at a national level, we were still able to win a minimum wage increase and paid sick leave. And so we impacted the lives of women in particular. So women were most impacted by the sick leave. And close to 1 million women and families and men were able to now have earned sick days that they didn't count with before that. And those types of things were a win on election day, but the other wins that we said that we have to be the ones to define our wins. And so for us, we wanted to run the campaign in a different way. We wanted to make sure that we were lifting up the voices of women, and that women were the ones that were leading this campaign. So the field director, the communications director, were all women and women of color that were at the helm of the campaign. And I think that it's important for us to think of ourselves running for office, but I also think it's important for us to think of ourselves as the chiefs of staff, the campaign managers, the staffers, the community liaisons, because all of those levels have power and influence, and those conversations that happen with those elected officials not only have to be from the outside, from the grassroots, but they also have to be from the inside, and we have to have the right staff as well. So we should be running for office, but we should also be thinking of those other roles for the folks that maybe aren't the ones that see themselves yet as running for office. So what I will leave you with is being able to say that we need to continue, the work continues past 2020, but we're gonna win in 2020, and we're gonna take our country back, and we're gonna take our state back. And I wanna say that women are going to be at the helm of that. And if it's okay, I'm gonna take a little point of personal privilege here. And I would love to, if we could all stand, and if we can lead a chant. And I'm probably gonna have to move to the podium. And it's a powerful chant because it's by Asada Shakur. How many of us know? Yeah, she's a powerful, yes, thank you. Powerful freedom leader. And the way it goes is we'll repeat it 3 times. It is our duty to fight for our freedom. It is our duty to fight for our freedom. It is our duty to win. We must love each other and protect each other. We must love each other and protect each other. We have nothing to lose but our chains. We have nothing to lose but our chains. Okay, this time it gets a little louder. It is our duty to fight for our freedom. It is our duty to fight for our freedom. It is our duty to win. It is our duty to win. We must love each other and protect each other. We must love each other and protect each other. We have nothing to lose but our chains. We have nothing. Okay, so this last one, we're gonna say it like we're wide awake. We're gonna hold hands at your table, because this is what women's solidarity looks like.
We're on film.
Push. Okay, there it is. We're back. Okay, it is our duty to fight for our freedom.
It is our duty to fight for our freedom.
It is our duty to win.
It is our duty to win.
We must love each other and protect each other.
We must love each other and protect
We have nothing to lose but our chains.
We have nothing to lose but our chains.
Thank you.